What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Junkie Xperience YouTube channel where we serve your addiction for all things entertainment. And you know what time it is. It is time for our Junkie Flashback of the Week. And this week we are going to get into a 1993, I would say an urban romance set in South Central Los Angeles. And this movie is Poetic Justice, starring the legendary Janet Jackson, Tupac Shakur, Regina King, and Joe Torre. It was also directed by the late John Singleton. So you know how we do it over here. We're going to get into like some facts about the movie, like some interesting facts. And I'm going to tell y'all, I found some really interesting facts in this movie, like about this movie, just, you know, everything. Like, it was definitely a lesson, like a little history lesson for me. All right, so Poetic Justice came out in 1993, almost 30 years ago. And like I said, it was a romance drama that was centered around Janet Jackson, who played Justice, and Tupac Shakur, who played Lucky in the movie. So we're just going to get into like some facts, some things you didn't know, some things you may have already known, and just talk about the movie and things like that. So I'm not sure where I was when I saw Poetic Justice. I know that it had to be like on VHS or something like that when I was younger. Definitely saw it, enjoyed it. This time I watched it twice before I was to do this video. So, you know, just to make sure, you know, that I'm up on it. Every time I'm doing these videos, I'm making sure that the movie is like freshly embedded in my brain so that I can, you know, talk about it if I got to go off, you know, and talk about like different parts of the movie. But on this one, I'm just going to be giving out the facts, like some interesting facts that you probably didn't know. So let's get it started. All right. So the first fact that we want to talk about is that, guess what, guys? Ice Cube was actually offered the role of Lucky first, but he decided to turn it down because he just wasn't interested in playing a romance. And then that's how Tupac Shakur ended up with the role of Lucky in Poetic Justice. Next up, Poetic Justice was John Singleton's second film after his critically acclaimed drama Boys in the Hood. So, and if you pay attention to the movie, so if you pay attention to both movies, like if you watch Boys in the Hood and then you go and watch Poetic Justice, because I think they came out like 2 years apart. Boys in the Hood was like 91 and Poetic Justice was in 93. So if you notice that there are some of the same characters that were in Boys in the Hood made their way to Poetic Justice, such as Baja Jackson, who played Ice Cube's character, a young doughboy. So, you know, he played a young doughboy in Boys in the Hood, and in Poetic Justice, he actually played the little boy when Jessie came into the shop. Like when she, you know, asked him to go to the store, like make a store run for her. Like that was the same little boy at the time, Baja Jackson. Also, speaking of Jessie, she that is actress Tyra Farrell. She also played in Boys in the Hood. She played Doughboy and Ricky's mom, Miss Brenda Baker. And in Poetic Justice, she played Jessie, the salon owner that, you know, drove the Lexus and, you know, wore the form-fitting clothes and, you know, was kind of like a cool boss to her staff and stuff like that. Also, Lloyd Avery Jr., he was the guy like in the opening scene where he ID'd Markel, who was played by Q-Tip. Markel played Justice's boyfriend Markel, and he was ID'd when Markel was at the concession stand, like when Justice told him, or she asked him to go and get her some popcorn and jujubes. Like he was the guy who kind of ID'd Markel, and, you know, was like, you know, ain't that dude, you know, that was talking smack or whatever. So, you know, he ID'd him, and that was the reason, like he was the reason that you know, Markel was murdered at the beginning of the movie. So yeah, that was Lloyd Avery Jr. And so he also played the trigger man who gunned down Ricky in the streets on Boys in the Hood. So he was the actual trigger man for on Boys in the Hood as well. So yeah, you had some characters from Boys in the Hood who came over to Poetic Justice. So yeah, that was a cool fact right there. But in, you know, more tragic news, in real life, Lloyd Avery Jr. was convicted of a double homicide in 2001 and was sentenced to life in prison at Pelican Bay State Prison in California. In 2005, he was beaten and strangled to death by his cellmate Kevin Roby. And according to reports, Kevin Roby was like a satanic worshiper. And one night he just flipped out and like bashed Lloyd's head in and sprawled Lloyd's body across the cell floor inside a pentagram that he had drawn on the floor. And the officers, like the actual guards, the prison guards, didn't find Lloyd Avery's body until like 2 days later after that had happened. I was just like, wow, I did not know that was such tragic news, because I had no idea that that was the route that actor that his life took. Next fact: controversy surrounded Janet Jackson making Tupac Shakur get an AIDS test before they started shooting the movie. So Q-Tip, the actor who played Markel in Poetic Justice, who briefly dated Janet in the late 90s, and we also know, Q-Tip was the lead singer in A Tribe Called Quest. He confirmed that the rumor was true that Janet did make Tupac get an AIDS test, but John Singleton, when he was interviewed about it, he downplayed it and stated that it was just like, something that they joked around about on set. He said that they joked around because, Pac was out there, running around at the time, probably had, a bunch of different girlfriends or whatever. And they were like, oh, it may have been best for him to get an AIDS test before shooting a love scene with Janet. But, John Singleton was like, that didn't happen. It was just like a joke on set. But Tupac didn't find the joke funny because right around the time that movie was released, he told MTV News that if he and Janet were going to make love for real, then he could understand her wanting him to get tested. But since that wasn't the case, he didn't see the point. So whether, it was done or whether she had it done, I mean, it's still up in the air. Like I said, Q-Tip said that she did. But then John Singleton said something different. So yeah, that was a big, and I kind of remember that vaguely. I know I was a young kid at the time, but I kind of remember people talking about that before. All right, so the next fact is that the Rodney King verdict affected the filming. So during this time, this was like after the beating of Rodney King, by police officers, which launched the whole thing about police brutality. The Rodney King verdict was rendered during the filming of Poetic Justice. So on April 29, 1992, John Singleton, who said he was on his way to set to work when the verdict came out, that the police officers who had beat Rodney King were acquitted. So in an interview, I think that was it was kind of like an interview, but it was an interview in reference to a 2017 documentary on the LA burning, like the riots 25 years later. But John Singleton said, I was about 24 years old and we were shooting actually in Simi Valley. He said, we heard the verdicts on the radio and I was like, what? This can't be real. Let's go down to the courthouse. He was like, I just got there as they were coming out. He said, my anger was overwhelming. You could feel it in the air. And that's what he said in the interview. He said, the television cameras came running over to me. They wanted to hear what I had to say. I was enraged. I wanted everyone to know about what had happened or what was about to happen because they let these guys off. They dropped a time bomb, and I knew the focus from all this would be the aftermath, not about the unfair treatment. So yeah, that was a big part of, when those movies were made. Like even when, and I talked about this in my New Jack City video, the same thing, like that was like right around the time of the Rodney King beatings, and it was a lot of rioting going on during that time, and a lot of the folks wanted to blame it on these urban movies that were like really popular during that time frame, during that time period. So yeah, so Poetic Justice was one that was like being filmed like while the trial was going on, and was being filmed during the verdict of the Rodney King beating. Next fact: Jada Pinkett Smith auditioned, but she did not get the role of Justice. So Jada Pinkett, who was a close friend of Tupac, was rumored to have auditioned for the role that went to Janet Jackson in the end. And let John Singleton tell it, that part was actually written for Janet. Like he said, he had written the part of Justice for Janet. He had her in mind when he wrote the part. And Janet knew, because I think he had spoken to her like a couple years before the movie had come out. And he wanted her to know that he wrote for her. And he said, everybody just showed up at the office. So, it was other people that also auditioned for it. And it was told that it was, for a black female lead. But he stuck to his guns. He said he wrote it for Janet, so he wasn't giving it over to anybody else. And he said he had told her years prior that he wanted to do his next movie with her. So he said people were frustrated. He said folks hated on her. And that's when he did an interview with Essence Magazine. And Jada was also tapped to play in my last video about Love Jones. She was supposed to play the character of Nina Mosley, but she turned that one down. And this one turned around, and well, it wasn't turned around because Love Jones didn't come out until 1997, but she years later she turned down the Love Jones role. But before that she was turned down for the Justice role in Poetic Justice. Alright, next fact. The late Maya Angelou wrote the poems that were recited in the film by Justice. And it almost happened on accident. So John Singleton said he recalled, working with Maya Angelou, and she also acted in the movie. She had like a small part in the movie. And he said that he, contacted her. He was struggling trying to write poetry or whatever. He said he was reading a lot of Maya Angelou's poetry at the time. So he was just like, okay, he said, well, instead of me trying to struggle to write this poetry for the movie, he was like, let me reach out to Maya Angelou to see if there's a way that I can use, her poems. Like, he had to get permission from her. So he met her for lunch. He said, they bonded right on the spot. She agreed to let him use her poems, and she agreed to be in the movie. So, and he had her to improv a lot of her part in the movie, because he was just like, I can't write for Maya Angelou. Like, he just felt like he couldn't write for her because she was just such a phenomenal voice. He was like, it was hard to write for her. So, and he also said that, Maya Angelou had a part in him naming his daughter, because he named his daughter Justice Maya Singleton after the poet, which, I thought was very, very cute, that he named his daughter after her, and the character Justice. All right, so next fact is that Maya Angelou made Tupac cry. So, while on set together, Maya Angelou had to have a heart-to-heart moment with Tupac Shakur that made him cry. She was like, she didn't know who he was. She said he had gotten into like an argument with another young man on set. So she went and intervened and was like, let me talk to you or whatever. She said he was just cursing, and she was just like, look. She said, she was getting him to calm down or whatever. So she said she pulled him to the side, and she said, when was the last time that anyone told you how important you are? She was like, did you know that people stood on auction blocks and were bought and sold so that you could stay alive today? They say that Tupac was so moved by Maya Angelou's words that he started weeping in this woman's arms. Like, on set, like he started weeping in her arms. And then they say that, and then, Maya just didn't realize like the profound effect that she had on him at the time. And she said she went back to her trailer, and then after that, Janet Jackson just came running in, and she was like, Dr. Angelou, she said, I don't believe you actually spoke to Tupac Shakur. And Maya Angelou was like, she was like, darling, she was like, I don't know him from Six Pack. She said, I've never heard of him. She just saw a situation going on, and she wanted to diffuse it, before it got out of hand. But she definitely had an effect on him during the shooting of Poetic Justice. All right, and the last fact about Poetic Justice for this video is that Poetic Justice actually opened to mixed reviews but solid performances. So critics praised Tupac Shakur and Janet Jackson for their performances. So Roger Ebert, he actually praised the chemistry between the stars and applauded their relationship in the film. So he said, Roger Ebert said, her romance with Shakur is touching precisely because it doesn't take place in a world of innocence and naivete. Because they both know the risk of love, their gradual acceptance of each other is convincing. That's what he stated in his review. And the film also reached #1 in the box office at that time, and it was nominated for an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for the best song. So yeah, I'm telling you, Poetic Justice is one of those movies. It's legendary. It's going to go down, in history. I looked at it. The performances was great, and we cannot leave Miss Regina King out. She also had a phenomenal performance in there, between her and her boyfriend, Chicago, at the time, that was played by Joe Torre. Just the performances were great in that movie, and we definitely, that's one of our classics that you have to go back and watch. I wanted to see, of course, my goal is to see if it still holds up to this day, and you have to give it what it is. I know I was talking to a friend not too long ago, and I was telling her, when I was watching it, I was like, man, they really called women out of their names back then. It was just it was just prevalent. It was so prevalent for them to just, call women bees and hoes and things like that. And I'm just like, it was just almost like every conversation, Tupac's character Lucky was calling Janet, Janet's character Justice, out of her name, while they were traveling, because that's what they, that's how they ended up kind of bonding. They traveled from LA to Oakland because they were making a run. Janet and her crew had Janet and Regina King's character, they had a hair show that they needed to attend in Oakland, and then Tupac and Joe Torre's characters, they had a run because they actually worked for the post office, and they had a run to do, and Tupac was gonna take care of some other business while he was up there. But yeah, I'm telling you, it was that kind of was something that stood out to me, in this movie. And I'm guessing okay, this is just how things were at the time. So that's, probably why John Singleton wrote it like he saw it. I guess it was just everyday life. But yeah, that's my review on the 1993 classic. I call it the hood classic, Poetic Justice. So if you know any other facts about this movie and you want to talk about it even further, definitely drop down in the comment section. Leave your comment, comment, and subscribe to the Junkie Xperience podcast. And I want to thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, bye, Junkies.